Okay, good morning. Maybe we can start the panel 2. So my name is Čedomir Nestorović. I'm a professor at the SE Business School in Singapore. And we have a very interesting panel now talking about the southeast of Europe on one side, and maybe West Asia on the other side. So we have 3 panelists for this panel, and we have a discussion. So the first panelist will be Professor Hikari Ishido. So he is coming from Chiba University, and his topic will be the political and economic integration in crisis, a theoretical viewpoint. He will be followed by Professor Ayami Suzuki here, and she is coming from Taoshishin University, and her topic will be State Sovereignty and Transnational Network Among Leaders, case studies from Southeast Asia. And last but not least, Professor Masaki Matsuo from Utsunomiya University. He will talk about the neo-plural society, a model of non-inclusive immigration society. The discussant will be Damir Kapili, professor from the University of Sarajevo. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Professor Hikari Ishido. So he will be the first to listen.
Thank you very much. So still good morning to all of you. Thank you very much for giving me this precious occasion to make our cases. So this is actually sort of like a half-baked, the best effort, but half-baked type of discussion, because we were tasked to present something coming out of our ongoing research project, which is about the regional integration under this umbrella project of can you see it? Relational studies on global crisis, establishing a new paradigm. So this is the emphasis point for this particular session, because establishing a new paradigm of social and human sciences, all such a big and gigantic topic. So let's think big, right? So that's the mood I am in, we are in right now. So based on relation studies, in order to overcome contemporary global crisis. So our particular focus is about this regional integration, in my case, I will not be presenting in my own case, but Trans-Pacific Partnership, US withdrew from this community. Now it's just composed of 11 members, and then US has its own agenda, bilateral agenda. So maybe.
My apologies.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm still. Thank you very much. So. This one is actually part of our research team under this umbrella project. Okay, so let's switch to the PowerPoint. So my topic is about the political and economic integration in crisis. A theoretical viewpoint. Maybe it's a meta sort of viewpoint, which might be somewhat I don't know, novel and not so conventional actually. So unconventional. That might be the best phrasing, I think. So, this one. So we take this broad view of the concept of regional integration to mean diverse forms of political and economic relations among nations, and we're pushing forward an interdisciplinary sort of research. So I'm an economist by training, and then my 2 team members are political scientists, right? Regional scientists. Okay, regional scientists, political scientists. Okay, so we're transdisciplinary in nature. So we're still, nonetheless, and trying to push forward an interdisciplinary research on the hierarchical and complex nature of these relations, because relation is quite important for this project. So regional integrations. There are several ways of looking at regional integrations. We could look at trade link relationship, or maybe a security kind of linkage, even militarily linked. So regional integration can take various forms. So as you can see, you see NAFTA, Arab Maghreb Union, GCC, that's Gulf Cooperation Council, and then for the Asian part, we see this ASEAN, or Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So these could be the examples of regional integrations. This one is also another way of looking at regional integration. So if you look at this Euro-Asian continent, then this Shanghai Cooperation Organization or SCO, it could come into the picture. So it depends on what kind of regional integration you talk about. But anyway, I'm a trade economist by training, like I mentioned. So from my own economically oriented perspective, then evolution of regional trade agreements in the world since 1948 until 2018. So the number has been skyrocketing, as you can see. This was taken from the WTO data. So we should definitely have to think about why there is regional integration taking place in a rapid pace in recent years. So in our project so far, we have been making efforts to build up some kind of a viewpoint or a theory or a meta, something kind of like a framework. I don't know how to put it, but anyway. So we have been trying to look at the hierarchical nature of regional integrations and to conduct research activities to further develop it. So focusing on the hierarchical structure, which means macro momentum of regional integration, interstate regional integration of meso level, micro level individual / ethnic entity. So for example, in my topic, Mr. Donald Trump, he's a microscopic agent, but he could influence, at the meso level of the U.S. related regional integration. He could also influence the more macro level, this momentum of buy my country's product first. Conservatism, unilateralism, whatever you call it. So we have kind of hierarchical structure in view. Then, of course, empirically speaking, we should definitely talk about a concrete integration framework, including ASEAN or the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Gulf Cooperation Council, it's just here to just highlight some aspects from the Middle Eastern area, but not in depth for today's particular session. But in the European Union, which is EU, of course, Brexit is a quite much talked about issue these days. So, but we will not be going too deep into this topic. So there's pluses and minuses about regional integration based on the perception of the pluses and minuses. Each state will opt for joining or leading that particular regional integration issue. So some empirical evidence, like I already mentioned, ASEAN. The ASEAN is suffering, and then this topic is Dr. Suzuki part, because she will be going to talking deeply about China's influence on the solidarity or the degree of unification of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN. So and then the next topic by Dr. Matsuo will be neo-plural society in the Middle Eastern area. So I will simply mention those regions and then just move on. So my part is just like a viewpoint, like I said. So macro, meso, and micro interaction always taking place. This one is adapted from our mentor, Professor Keiko Sakai's original figure. So at the micro level, we see some kind of heterogeneity in terms of firm activity, size, or productivity differ across different firms. And then industry associations have different way of pros and cons about, let's say, Trans-Pacific Partnership. So industrial associations in Japan were against TPP, for example, but Toyota and all the other industrial companies were, of course, in favor of pushing forward TPP, for example. And ethnic groups, maybe this topic could apply more closely to the Middle Eastern area or maybe to Africa. Relationship and characteristics. So interaction. We take this view overall relationship among agents influence the characteristics of the agent we talk about, and then that the characteristic of the agent again influences back the relationship among agents. So it's like a circular causality, which makes the attractable, type of research quite difficult. But nonetheless, if this is a reality, then we need to look at the relationship. But relationship among who? And then the characteristics of these agents. But the nature or the characteristics of these agents are also changing based on the relational change. So it's an ongoing process. Okay, so then an interactive place between, or maybe field would be a better translation. Between macro, micro, and meso and micro events. So at the meso level, regional integrations could be placed. The regional integrations get influenced by macro and micro events. So if Donald Trump, Mr. Trump, he as a micro agent is saying something against trade liberalization, then at the meso level, we can witness, this NAFTA, renegotiate. NAFTA meaning North American, free trade agreement, renegotiated, etc. So, at the meso level, regional integrations get influence, and then, that influence will also move further up to the macro level, the momentum to capture, trade benefits, for example. So, circular causality. So, a framework for the analyzing the regional integration could be like this, in this table. So, there's operators at the macro, meso, and micro level, and then being operated. So, at the macro, meso, and micro level. So, in the description, maybe we should describe, these arrows, like from meso to macro, or from macro to micro, from meso to micro, etc., etc. So it's a very complicated exercise, but and then never-ending story. So we should maybe take some kind of a partial equilibrium approach. So just to cut out, what we are interested in after all, and then just try to, discuss a causality among these, countable number of, agents. Maybe that's what we can do at best. So we need to be a bit negative about this. So ASEAN, so divided regional integration. For the other part, the contents, I will leave this for maybe later discussion. So divided regional integration because of the presence of China's influence in the South China Sea. And then, China's, one belt, one road, initiative that's influencing the solidarity of ASEAN. And the middle is virtually no functioning regional integration, arguably, because, as I mentioned, GCC is operating, but virtually maybe not operating, so there's pros and cons about that. So an alternative society needed, so based on our framework, we could, I don't know, I cannot say this, with much confidence, but maybe there could be an alternative society needed based on our framework. Okay, let's just speak talk. So the EU, it's about Brexit. So there's of course costs and benefits about being in this EU regional integration framework. But of course it's a costly thing to stay because you have to pay a lot of contribution to the EU. Benefit, of course, they also have benefit, bigger market, and then tax free treatment, etc. But migrant workers are coming in, and that's a must, for each member country to accept a certain number. So that might be, by some, participants, be viewed as some kind of a cost. So I'm an economist by training, and then here is the father of economics, Adam Smith, and he was also a moral philosopher. He wrote two very big, voluminous books. The first book about, it's about moral sentiment, talks a lot about the relationship, the importance of human beings cherishing relationship, reciprocity principle included. So give and take. Not give and give or take and take only, but give and take. That's how the society should function. And then human beings also cherish self-interest, of course. So we just produce, meat, not because of love of society or love of other people, but because of his or her own benefit. So So that's what is described in the wealth of nations. But humans are actually trying to maximize benefits plus relationships. So that's my single point. And then if we introduce this benefits plus relationships, then this is sorry about this economic side the treatment so the horizontal axis is trying to measure the partner countries' request for this potential regional integration. The vertical curve is about axis measures my country's request. Please reduce tariff, or please open your investment sector, etc. So, if you insist too much, if you request too much, then your relationship, negotiation relationship with the partner will be broken. So that's why you try not to break that kind of relationship. So your country should try to maximize the sum of the benefits plus the linkage, the relationship, or the harmony. If you insist too much, and while the other party is not insisting too much, then your relationship will work. So introducing that kind of term in this evaluation. Sorry about this function. Then we have this kind of meandering curve response curve. So the width of the horizontal part means tolerance level. So even if your partner is requesting too much, at some point, up to a certain point, up to B, your country will not increase the level of your country's request so much. So that's why it's going up, but just slowly like this. But up to some point, beyond some point, which is the critical value, then there is some kind of a catastrophic jump from B to C. And then your country's request will suddenly increase. So this is kind of like the division of regional integration, if it's existing. If it's potential, then it will never happen. So in ASEAN, this division of regional integration might be happening in Middle East, division of or in regional because of this division integration. There is no existing and virtually functioning regional integration. So my country's request, partner country's request, two curves put together, and then you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 equilibrium. But as you can see, point H and point I are rather fragile. If your country or your partner country will slightly change the strategy, then H, the intersection will be lost, or I, this intersection will also be lost. So it's either both countries insist too much, or not insist to much for both countries. But what tends to happen is this point J, which means that both countries are insisting too much, and so trade negotiation will never reach the conclusion. So that's the way I have heard in the talk about regional integration. So next topic is about our two empirical topics, but very diverse in nature. So usually these are not under the same umbrella, but anyway, ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations by Dr. Ayame Suzuki. And then the second part is Neo-Plural Society, or with Migration in View by Dr. Masaki.
Thank you very much.
I want to focus more on a case studies of Southeast Asia, namely South China Sea. I will focus on the relationship between the Southeast Asian countries and the extra-regional power, which is China, rather than focusing on the relationship among the countries within the region. By doing so, I will show how the flow of resources that cuts across the border, or that cuts across the border of the region, can somehow make a sovereign state elusive, as well as a regional integration fragile. Now, let me briefly explain the nature of the South China Sea issue. First of all, South China Sea issue is a territorial dispute among 5 countries in one region, which is Vietnam, Brunei, Malaysia, Philippines, and China, and Taiwan. The center of this territorial dispute is no doubt China, because China claims the biggest area in the sea. I guess this map may be a little bit not very clear on the screen, but China's claim basically is stretches along the coastal area of South China Sea, which is shown in the red dot line, as you can see, which is called 9-dash line. This 9-dash line puzzles many international law specialists because we cannot find any sound basis in the modern international law that can support this Chinese claim on the South China Sea based on the 9-dash line. And then second, this issue is also about the open access to maritime commons. Because as you may know, South China Sea is one of the most busiest sea lanes in the world. So if the freedom of navigation in the sea is jeopardized, then our free trade will be jeopardized as well. And third, it's about military dominance. As you may see in the map, there are 3 blue circles shown in the map. Basically, there are 3 hotly contested areas in the sea. One is Paracel Islands, right next to Vietnam, and then Spratly Islands, which is in the middle of the South China Sea, and then Scarborough Shoal, which is only 200 kilometers away from the Philippines coast. China has already established effective control in Paracel Islands, and it has also reclaimed an artificial islands, 7 of them, and have already introduced military equipment and facilities in these islands in the Spratly Islands. So basically, China has control over Paracels and also Spratlys. And since 2012, China has already have effective control over the Scarborough Shoal. Before 2012, this shoal was basically a fishing field for the Filipino fishermen, and also the Filipino Navy was stationed there. But after 2012, the Chinese naval ship came and it started stationed there, and then the Chinese authority basically scares the Filipino fishermen off. Now, China has Paracel, Spratly, and is likely to have Spratly as Scarborough as well. Although China has not yet reclaimed the Scarborough Shoal, once it starts the reclamation and once it starts to introduce a military facility in that area, we have triangular appear in that sea, which means China will going to have land, sea, and air. The South China Sea issue is not only regional concern, it actually has global implications in 2 senses. One is US-China hegemonic rivalry. Since 2000, China started to be more assertive in the maritime enforcement in the area. And in 2010 onwards, United States started to show its interest in the South China Sea as well. For instance, in 2010, the ASEAN Regional Forum, then State Secretary Hillary Clinton said the United States have an interest in the open access in the South China Sea. That kind of opened the rivalry between these 2 countries over the sea. And since 2015 onwards, it's 2015 instead of 14, the United States deployed the naval ships to this area under the name of Freedom of Navigation Operation. The South China Sea also has an impact on the effectiveness of international law. In 2013, the Philippines government filed a case to the International Court of Arbitration on the legitimacy of the 9-dash line, which has been claimed by China. In 2016, July 12, the International Arbitration Court issued an award, which basically said China's claim to the historic rights and also the 9-dash line is incompatible with the United Nations Convention of Law of the Sea. So the ruling of the International Arbitration Court was very clear. However, Chinese authority just called this ruling as junk and also said it's politically motivated. Therefore, we do not comply with it. As you may know, the international law, the effectiveness of international law hinges on the belief in the law by the countries. And if the country loses confidence in the law and starts to behaving otherwise than is prescribed in law, the law is not a law anymore. So the South China Sea is not just a territorial dispute. It has, yes, regional implication and also implication on the US-China boundary, and it can also destabilize the international law regime. Now, how do Southeast Asian countries, which are basically middle and small-sized countries, respond to this crisis, to this issue? There are several very interesting and insightful views on this. First of all, there are groups of works that say Southeast Asian countries have been employing stock balancing, accommodation, or hedging. To be honest, many of these works do not necessarily clearly define these concepts, but probably the most frequently employed and the most clearly defined is the concept of hedging. Hedging is a behavior in which a country seeks to offset risks by pursuing multiple policy options that are intended to produce mutually counteracting effects under the situation of high uncertainties and high stakes. As you may know, most of the countries have very strong connections with China in terms of economy. For many countries, China is a #1 trade partner and leading investment as well. So they cannot really rock the boat when it comes to the economic relations with China. But at the same time, knowing what China has been doing in the South China Sea, they also have to do something about it. But the Southeast Asian countries are too small to act alone. So what they do, what many of them, numbers of them do, is to bring the United States into the region to check the Chinese behavior. So in a sense, these scholars assume a rational state can pick the strategy based on the endowment of the material power of each country. Another school of thought say ASEAN is doing very well. The scholars say that ASEAN succeeded in mesh, shape, or socialize domesticating major powers, including China. In 2015 December, ASEAN Political and Security Community was established. This ASEAN Political and Security Community says that it is supposed to apply a comprehensive approach that focuses on safety of navigation and security concern in the region, including South China Sea, of course. So the ASEAN is supposed to play a pivotal role in this conflict, but it's not the case. It's not the case with this school of thought in the first place. The rational state make a decision on their strategy based on their material power endowment, or the ASEAN being an effective regional organization. Today's presentation will focus more on the former, the individual countries. In the first place, ASEAN failed to issue a joint statement since 2012, mostly because of the split over the South China Sea issue. Basically, there are countries such as Cambodia and Laos that are really close to China and try to represent Chinese interests in the ASEAN fora. On the other hand, there are countries that are very critical against China, such as Philippines, Vietnam, and Malaysia used to be one of them, very close to them. And more importantly, in today's presentation is the changing position of some countries vis-à-vis South China Sea issues. Today I want to focus on Malaysia. The material endowment, the size of Malaysia, or the economic ties with China do not really change over time. In spite of it, Malaysian behavior vis-à-vis this issue has changed quite drastically. For instance, before 2016, Malaysia preferred dialogue in the multilateral fora, which is basically ASEAN and China, to resolve this dispute. Well, it's understandable because Malaysia is too small to have a talk directly, one-to-one talk with China. And also Malaysia opted for a resolution based on the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. It's also understandable small countries try to make use of the law rather than, because they are very weak in a military sense. And third, the Malaysia government has been trying to hedge with the United States by trying to bring the United States into the region. However, 2016 onwards, especially the latter half of the year, Malaysia started to express its position in a very different way. First of all, the settlement through bilateral channels. That is, Malaysia and China sitting together, one-to-one, settle this issue, which was preferred by China actually. And then also, arbitral tribunal that I mentioned earlier. Malaysia did not say anything after this ruling, in spite of the fact that before Malaysia has been saying that the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea is very important. And then third, there has been a phenomenon which can be understood as deviation of hedging. Okay, let me go really quickly. First of all, before 2016, Malaysia tried to hedge with the United States, with China by bringing in the United States. For instance, Malaysian government welcomed U.S. repeating, and it also participated in the U.S.-led joint military exercises in the region. And also some of the patrol airplanes flew from Malaysian base. The American patrol airplanes flew from Malaysian base and then patrolled in the South China Sea. Skip this. However, 2016, July, when the International Tribunal Court issued an award on the 9-dash line, which basically says the 9-dash line doesn't have any basis. Malaysian Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a statement which basically says Malaysia knows that arbitral tribunal that issued its award. Period. That's it. It does not say that all the parties should comply with it or Malaysian government respects this ruling. Not whatsoever. It does say Malaysia knows. And it's quite weak given the original position of Malaysia, which says that the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea should be the way to resolve this issue. And further, in November 2016, when the then Prime Minister Najib visited Beijing, he published this op-ed in one of the Chinese newspapers. I want to read, but I will just cut short, read out the bold letters. Malaysia and China are united in agreeing on the need to defend the sovereignty of the nation state and in the belief that the individual histories, values, and governance systems of different countries must be respected. It is crucial that global institutions reflect the legitimate desires and viewpoints of the countries that were given no say in the legal and security infrastructure that was set up by the victors of the Second World War. What the Prime Minister Najib tries to say from this op-ed is basically the United States has been too bossy, and the United States should not interfere with our domestic affairs. And then also at the same time, Najib started to talk about the possibility of bilateral dialogue with China. Now, what explains this change? It's leader's survival. Since 2014, Najib faced this huge scandal called 1MDB, One Malaysia Development Berhad. It's a sovereign fund, which was supposed to invest into a project that can possibly upgrade the industries of Malaysia. However, since 2014, there was a widespread allegation of money politics, such as money laundering, time's up, okay. Anyway, change. So there's a very drastic change in the position, and then what explains this change is really the survival of the leader, which basically is Prime Minister Najib. And this one, please, can you give me another 2 minutes? Thank you. So this 1 NDB was a sovereign fund, but in practice it was used to support the very well-connected businessmen as well as electoral fund. And then also it was also known that Najib distributed some of the money to the governing party members as well. So it was pretty much used as a political resources to support Najib's position. So what can we say from this anecdotal evidence? In ideal type of democracy, the elite, which is shown as E, is supposed to get support from the voters and also core constituencies, basically the governing party members. But in doing so, the elite has to perform because elite has accountability to those who vote for him. But in Malaysia's case, what happened was the exchange between the elite and voters and exchange between the elite and core constituencies largely depended on the exchange of support and resource distribution. So when the resource distribution is very much a key of the elite survival, what happens is shown on the right side. When there is this huge extra country, extra sovereign state after which has big resources, and this extra, let's call it China. When China can give resources for the Prime Minister Najib, who desperately needs this resource to keep his own position, Najib's decision making can be gravitated more by this transnational elite network rather than the sovereign state, which is Malaysia. I have several research agendas, but I believe we can discuss about it later. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now passing to Dr. Matsui for his presentation.
Hello everyone. First I'd like to express my gratitude to all participants and those who prepared this symposium and organized this symposium. My name is Masaki Matsuo of Tsurugi University, and my major is the political economy of the Middle East, and I'm now studying about the authoritarian survival by distributing oil, petroleum wealth. And also I'm a member of our research team, which is now studying about migrant issues, migrants from Southeast Asia to the Middle East. And about the activities of our research team, please search Neoplural Society on Google, so you can find the website of our research team. Today, I would like to talk about international migration from the perspective of the Middle East, especially that of the Arab Gulf states. Arab Gulf states is namely Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar, and Oman. Hereafter, I refer them as the AGS. The international migration is one of the issues of globalization, and it locates at the heart of the global crisis. When we look at the studies of migration issues, we can find the paradigm that migration studies have been constructed on the experience of developed countries, such as right of migrants or integration of migrants into the host societies. We can find rich studies based on this paradigm. However, from the point of view of the Middle East or a point of view of the AGS, we cannot apply that paradigm to grasp the reality of the Middle East, migrant society in the Middle East. So now I think it's a time to construct a new paradigm or a new concept to understand the reality of the migrant societies in the Arab states or in Asia. It isn't the neo-plural society. So what is the neo-plural society? This is a new concept to understand the migrant society in the Ages and in Asia. The character of neo-plural society is no reciprocal relations between nationals and migrants, nor within migrants. In neo-plural society, nationals construct social relationship only between nationals, including naturalized migrants, and migrants construct it only with migrants who have the same nationality. As a result, the society becomes divided along the nationality. We named it based on the concept of a plural society of Furnival, a British colonial officer who served in Southeast Asia. He found the society there divided between the ethnic or racial groups with hierarchical structure between groups. He named it plural society, referring it as not united, single society. We use this concept with some modification to explain contemporary migrant society that is divided along the nationality. What is the character of migrant society of the AGS? First of all, Asia is the major region of the international migration, and the AGS is the largest migrant absorber in Asia. So AGS is at the heart of global migration phenomenon. However, the social and economic status of migrants are very low. In addition, there is no reciprocal relations between nationals and migrants or within migrants except within the same nationality. The table 1 shows that Asia is the largest migrant sending region and the second receiving region next to Europe. Because its population and economic growth are larger than Europe, Asia will attain the top region of international migration in the near future. Table 2 shows that the Arab states absorbs about 33% of total migrants in Asia. It means that the AGS is the main migrant absorbers of the world. And table 3 shows that in Saudi Arabia, the wage difference between Saudis and Indian migrants is more than 3 times. The main migrant absorber creates non-reciprocal migrant society with huge economic disparity. This is the character of migrant society in the AGS. But why is there no reciprocal relation? We can explain it as a result of rational choice of nationals and migrants. Because reciprocity is built on the mutual prospect within 2 parties. Both of them will offer the other party a good action in expectation that the party will receive a return from the other as a reward of the action. If one party recognizes that the other will leave the society within a short period, the party will lose its incentive to behave to the other party in the way of reciprocity. But why do migrants build reciprocity relation only with migrants of the same nationality? This is also the result of the rational choice, because they can expect the continuation of the relation only with migrants who have the same nationality, of course, because both of them return to the same country. Here we can find that the short period of stay works as a bar to their reciprocity. So we can reach to the next question. Why short period? Actually, we can find this short stay of migrants not only in the AGS, but also globally. In many countries, long-stay migrants are considered to be prospective applicants for naturalization. Most of the receiving countries set a limit on the naturalization because of the anxiety of fiscal shortage. Hence, most of the receiving countries allow migrants to stay short period, usually 2 years, without accompanying their dependents except high-skilled migrants who are supposed to contribute tax payments to the governmental budget. Short-stay migrants can be found globally, but the AGS has its unique reason for it. The AGS never rely on the tax revenue because they have a huge oil revenue. They try to decrease the tax as much as possible in order to acquire enough popularity to continue authoritarian regimes. Hence, all migrants, irrespective of their skills, are considered to be financial burdens in the AGS. So, the naturalization is never approved and short-term contract is dominant in the AGS. But even in such situations, why do so many migrants decide to move to the AGS? The reason is there are plenty of low-skilled workers who are refused to enter the developed countries. And the AGS receive mainly low-skilled migrants. Low-skilled workers find the AGS as their last resort and use it as a convenient opportunity to earn for limited purposes such as money for marriage, tuition for their children, purchasing houses, without paying a cost for social integration to the host country or host society. So we can say they optimize their lives on the premise of the short-term contract or short stay. The statistics show that in the AGS, more than 80% of migrants are characterized into the low-skilled workers. This is so attractive for low-skilled workers. Concerning to the strategy of migrants, we can find an interesting term used by Filipino migrants in Dubai. They use the term open country or open city to refer to Dubai. Open country means a country easy to enter and to create the way of life of their home country. They refer it as a place free from pressure to assimilate, and they can easily find their jobs, and they can easily choose to quit the job and return to home. Neo-plural society is a kind of open society in Filipino migrants' term. So we can find the process of the emergence of NPS and how it works. In the AGS, migrants make no fiscal contribution because the AGS depends not on tax but on oil. This diminishes the incentive to naturalize migrants so that they allow them only short period of stay. This brings the limitation of reciprocity and then leads to the neo-plural society. However, nearly the same process can be found in industrial economies because they select migrants according to their fiscal contribution. The process surrounded by green line indicate the process of AGS, and the process surrounded by a red line indicate that of industrial countries. This chart indicates that the industrialized countries include two types of migrant society within each country. When we consider that many industrialized countries embrace democracy, we understand that the reason why migration becomes serious issues. Because these countries solve two different questions which have two opposite directions, inclusion and non-inclusion, at the same time. Also, this chart indicates that neoliberal society has its influence even in industrial countries, and that depends on its economic characteristics. If the country chooses the strategy to achieve its economic growth by innovation, the size of neoliberal society becomes smaller comparatively. And if the country chooses the strategy to use cheap workers for its economic growth, neoliberal society becomes larger. It means we can find neoliberal society in every country. The neoliberal society is not a unique society in the AGS, but it is supposed to have a kind of universality. So this is the conclusion. Neoliberal society is an equilibrium of non-inclusive migration policy and the strategy of migrants. Focusing on the strategy of migrants reveals a neoliberal society. And the AGS is the model of NPS, and the NPS might have the universality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Matsura.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to just very quickly wrap up the session. So these two empirical works are very, very diverse in nature, and diverse in nature. What could be the implication for these two empirical topics from the meta type of work viewpoint that I have discussed? Thank you very much. So implication for ASEAN. So trade business might be more important than ASEAN relationship, intra-ASEAN relationship. So in terms of this expression, formal expression, benefits which are big from China are greater than relationships with the other intra-ASEAN members. Then regional integration fails. And then the implication for the neo-plural society. Individual living standard might be more important than a relationally coherent or single society. So benefits as a monolithic or single society is smaller than the cost, which is bigger, of maintaining relationships with domestic minorities or migrants. So in this case also, regional integration failure happens. So that's the tentative conclusion that at least we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you. I'm now giving the floor to the discussant, Dr. Cassidy.
Okay, thank you very much. Also, thank you to the presenters for three very interesting contributions. There's a lot to cover, basically. A very diverse group of papers has some things in common, some things are individual to these papers. Now, I will go through them one by one and maybe also try to find some interlinkages between them. So the first more theoretical sort of contribution by Julie on this for example, that some types of regional integration, such as the European Union, have a much more stronger impact than, for example, the African Union, which tries, but is more based on military relationships than it is with the European Union on trade relationships. So can we talk about differences on the types of these regional integrations? This is something that might also give more value to the theoretical framework itself. Now, one thing that you try to present, and it is partially clear, but I think that might need a bit more explanation, is this level of analysis that you look at. And this is something that's divided between micro, meso, and macro level in your analysis. The thing is, I'm not sure how to construct questions of causality between three different levels. So you can find these somewhere, but as a first step, it might be more beneficial to simplify it and look at causality between two levels, on several levels, and then add this up. Because if we talk about foreign policy analysis, and a lot of this is based on a more sort of theoretical background on foreign policies of different countries and how they interact, it's usually mostly between two levels. And this two-level causality can be a first step to exploring a multi-level causality, because this is what you want to get to. This multi-level causality and how it feeds into regional integration programs. So here you have also questions of interlinkages between state actors and non-state actors. And these operate at different levels. You mentioned nation states, you mentioned firms and businesses, and you mentioned international organizations. These are these three levels. But also to look at them as ways of how nation states, which are still the most important international actor today, relate to both sub-state actors and supra-state actors. So using this causality between nation states and these other two levels can be a way to look at it. Now, there's one thing that's also partially missing, and it's something called transnational advocacy networks. And this is where multiple actors work together on these levels to overcome limitations that they have on one of them. A good example would be, for example, NGOs working together to overcome limitations that are imposed by state actors in a certain place and working across borders at the same time. So it adds another level of complexity at the same time, but it can give you a framework that already exists that can be used to try and measure causality in these things. Now, how would you want to measure causality is my main question. I know it's a theoretical model, but if you work on this theoretical model, it might be good to think of these empirical data that you want to look at. So, from your presentation, I saw that you employ some game theoretical models, and this is something that will definitely, probably play a role in this. But also, since you're from an economic background, some econometric analysis might also contribute to this. Just simply adding up a lot of data and finding causality between them. It might give you some insight. I'm not sure if you explored any of this yet, but I would like to have your comment on this. So this way forward that you want to work into creating a more verifiable way of working with this theoretical framework. For Suzuki Ayame, it's a very region-centered approach. So ASEAN is something that is working to become a stronger organization, and sometimes succeeding, sometimes not. Okay. You propose these two approaches, so the rational state approach and a regional integration approach, sort of countering trends from other countries. Now, you have this basic sort of idea that, and you focus on this rational state approach as sort of a main explanatory factor in explaining how ASEAN currently functions. So this rational state approach that we use is also sometimes maybe a weakness of this whole explanation, because it relies on, it's contingent on the foreign policy of third actors. So China, of course, is one of the two actors in this relationship, and you mentioned Malaysia as the second one, and the United States as the third one. But the United States is not geographically close to this region. It's economically tied to this region and militarily, yes, but still it has much more foreign policy going on than just Southeast Asia. So It's just a part of its foreign policy. And this makes U.S. foreign policy much more volatile. It can change. And this reliance on third actors is also something that can be a weakness of this explanatory approach. So in this sense, you also have to look at domestic politics within the United States. And this adds this level of complexity. So if you look at this rational state approach, you can use it and you can also add to it by looking at this relational politics, that relations within the United States have their impact on the South China Sea, for example. So that the battle for the South China Sea is then fought in North Dakota on the production of oil fields and in the factories in Wisconsin, and how this plays out. It's another layer of complexity. And the question is, do you want to really bring this in? So in the whole overview of your project, I would say yes, do that, but I'm not sure how you will operationalize it and then be able to measure it, this level of impact. And the agenda on this domestic elite competition, you can put it up sort of as a two-player game between domestic politics within, for example, Malaysia. And this would be sort of an approach that tries to reconcile this both weakness and complexity. To look at two domestic actors within a country, be it Malaysia, be it Philippines, both supported by external actors, in this case China and the US, sort of trying to either balance each other out or relying on support from other foreign actors. But this level of domestic politics is something that I see as missing in this part, in this stage of the analysis. And it plays such an important role. As we have seen with the current US president, that domestic US politics is actually the driving force of US foreign politics at this current moment. For the presentation by Matsuo Masaki, it's not so much political science, so I'm trying to sort of figure out how much I can contribute to this. You do have this idea that a neoplural, theoretically grounded neoplural society, that you have these different segments of the society that do not interact with each other. In what I study, I think politics, you also have this, but it's just domestic parts of the society that don't communicate with each other. In this case, one thing that I wrote down, and Lily actually focused on it, is this relation of a state towards, on the one hand, its nationals, and on the other hand, towards migrants. So how a state reacts to this influx of workers, of people, and especially on the topic of distributing state resources. And this goes from healthcare to pensions to basically enforcing traffic safety. Do you enforce it differently for your nationals, or do you enforce it differently for nationals of other countries? Do you get to drive on the roads? So the thing that basically looks at this question, you also mentioned, is this temporality. The question of temporality is hugely important in what you discuss. So how long are these people in this country? Are they there only for a short term, or do you try to integrate them into your society? And the question, and we touched a little bit on this, is who actually integrates migrants into a society? Who's responsible for initiating this? Is it the domestic populations? In your case, it would be the Arab populations of Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and so on. Or is it the state structures, the institutions of the state that try to integrate these people, or keep them away from integrating? So who is responsible for these groups not mixing? Is it because the Arab population doesn't want to mix with them, or because the state does not incentivize this? In my case, it would be both. Like, you need to bring both in relation to one another. So are there any examples of Arab population actually working with migrants, trying to give them health care that they don't have, trying to enable them resources, even if the state doesn't do this? If you can find any examples that of these, then you would have actually this two-layer approach. Then you could claim that it's sort of both sides need to work on this. And the second thing that is equally important, and again, you mentioned it, is this interrelation between the people who work abroad and their influence in the countries where they originate. So the influence of diaspora, both in terms of knowledge transfer, but also economic influence that goes both ways. It's not just for the society where they're migrating to, in terms of contributing to taxes, but also to the societies from where they originate, in terms of eventually, if they return, bringing back know-how and knowledge, or if they don't return, creating a steady flow of remittances that then are able to boost the economy. So this is, again, another layer of complexity that you can add on to this, and I just want your thoughts on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Captain, for this very interesting and compelling remarks. We will continue as for the first panel. We first give the floor to the speakers in order to answer the questions or to answer the different clarification demands. And after that, we take a couple of questions from the audience. I know that lunch is approaching very soon, so we have to keep it tight. Please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kazbich. So, concerning the first question about the ranking of importance, so let's say EU has this democracy, human rights at the top agenda, whereas in the case of Asia, economically driven integration tends to be the main focus. Of course, Japan has this expression not free trade agreement, but economic partnership agreement, which is more comprehensive than FTA. It's simple, trade liberalization, but it's not really as comprehensive as this democratically governed single market, etc. So it depends on which pair of regional integration negotiators we talk about. So that's the starting point as well. It's of course a fixed treatment or partial treatment, which relates to the later question. But take those characters as given first, and then move on. So. The two-level causality, I fully agree to that idea. So, macro, meso, micro are too complicated. So maybe micro and non-micro. So then at two levels, always. So then, of course, we try to sort of make some kind of a fine-tuning then into that reality. And then state non-actors, or as advocacy networks and transnational advocacy networks are, of course, very important, non-micro actors. So definitely we should try to, incorporate those. And then the causality issue. I hear from physics, a way of thinking is that there's a diabatic approximation, which means that if the variables are slowly changing only, then treat them as fixed. Then for example, in the case of social science in trade, maybe trade tariff regime is slow to change. And of course, financial or maybe labor standard in the domestic, market for the domestic workers, slowest to change. But financial, volatility, very quick to change. So maybe in that case, take financial more, quicker to change in variables, as our choice, variables. Maybe that's the basic kind of idea what I have for the time being. But thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Professor Ishida. We'll ask Dr. Suzuki to answer from the land.
Thank you very much for your very insightful and interesting comment. In the first place, I would like to respond to the way you understood my presentation today, largely due to the omission because of time constraints. I think I failed to convey what I wanted to say. My research does not really rest on the rational state approach. Rather, I'm trying to criticize it. And it's good that your question, your comment, enables me to talk a little bit about it. Rational state approach basically assumes that there is a sovereign state that can make decisions based on several conditions, including the material endowment, such as the size of the country, and also the economic ties, military force, etc. But in Malaysia's case, especially the country's drastic shift from hedging to something else after 2006 cannot be explained by this rational state approach. Because, as I said, the material endowment is constant. There is no change in the size of Malaysia, nor the military might. But this country seems to have changed its position quite drastically, to my eyes. So it has to be something else than the rational state approach. What I suggested here in this slide is that even the assumption of sovereign state maybe somewhat elusive, especially when the domestic politics, in the domestic domain, the leader's survival hinges on the resource distribution to support him or her in a position. If there is a very strong actor outside of this sovereign state that can give very big resources for this elite to distribute within his or her own country, it can make the state sovereignty somewhat elusive. Now, the then Prime Minister Najib was even making compromise in some of the exclusive economic zones of Malaysia. The territorial sovereignty is one of the core elements of sovereign state, but the leader is even willing to compromise in this domain, largely because he prioritized his own survival over the interests of the state, Malaysia, and then largely because his survival was so much supported by China. I did not really explain this part well, but in order for then Prime Minister Najib Razak to stay in power, he had to continue to distribute goods to his supporters, but he was short in resources, and in fact he was hugely in debt as well because of this scandal. Then China appeared and said, okay, I'm going to buy national bond of Malaysia. Okay, I will just buy the subsidiary of this debt-raising company. I can also give you this aid, international aid. So he got this resource. Now he has to listen to what China says at the sacrifice of what he is supposed to do to defend the territorial sovereignty of Malaysia. Now, your comment on third actor, very interesting, and then I really did not talk about it. If I understood correctly, the most important element in this comment is about how U.S. domestic politics affect its diplomacy and eventually the regional international relations. Well, it's true, after President Trump, many have changed, but there are many things that have not changed as well. There is something constant, especially in the security domain. The 7th Fleet is still there. And then also the freedom of navigation operation. It's been going actually more frequent under Donald Trump. And I asked some of the American specialists, they all said that there are these security elites consist of the security advisors and then also the military personnel who have been advocating basically the continuation of the Obama administration's policy. So if I see United States diplomatic as well as security policy in Southeast Asia, I can see so much continuity. So when we observe a country's policy, we have to really we tend to focus on the drastic changes which was brought by a very colorful animated leader, but at the same time we have to recognize the fact that there is something really constant. And also finally the domestic politics is again hugely because of my time mismanagement. Domestic politics, I believe, is a key factor in explaining the diplomatic as well as security policy of Southeast Asian countries. It's basically the security policy of Southeast Asian countries can be understood as an extension of domestic politics. And as I said, the reason that the then Prime Minister Najib Razak drastically changed his policy was because of the need for him to stay in power and the need for the resource for him to do so.
Thank you, Dr. Suzuki. Finally, Dr. Maso.
Yes, so thank you for your insightful comments. And about the team quality, usually they make a contract for only 2 years, but they can extend it and extend it and extend it. So they can live in the ages, for example, for 20 years or more than 20 years legally. But I use the term of temporality, but the point is, my migrants cannot decide when they go back to the country because the employer can cancel the contract only by their time, only by their part. So the migrants cannot decide when they can go back to the country. So this is a vulnerability. And this will be create the poor society in the AGS. And the other question of who have the responsibility of to integration or not to integration, it is a very interesting question because I cannot answer who have the responsibility because I can say I can show you two stories. First, many ordinary Gulf nationals do not know the situation of migrants because legally they are the hire or they make contract. But real contractor is not the Gulf citizens. They are Indian or they are themselves migrants. So the Gulf citizens do not know the real situation of the migrants in the AGS. So they do not know the problem, so they do not have any incentive to change the situation of migrants in the AGS. And the second is, also there is no restriction of number to accept in the AGS. This means that the government of AGS do not make any limit to limit of number to accept migrants. So how the number of migrants or how the period of the contract is decided. It is the mechanism of the market. So the market decides how many migrants should be there or how long the contract should be. So, but the government has the responsibility to keep the labor market healthy. So they have to eliminate the black market or illegal contract. So this is the role of the government of the AGS. And also, third part is maybe the influence or evidence of knowledge transfer from the agents to the, let's say, the developing countries. But our focus on not on the economic influence or economic result, but on the perception of migrants. How do they recognize or think about the situation of themselves in ages or after they go back to their countries? For example, they earn huge money in the ages and they go back to their country. They will become a hero in the village. So they will hide their real situation in Kuwait or in Dubai. Maybe they are harmed by the exploited situations, but they will hide real situations. And this will ironically maintain the exploitative situation in Gulf states. So this maybe support the society globally.
Thank you very much for this very complimentary information for your discussions before. We will open the floor for a couple of questions. So we already have a volunteer here. True.
Well, thank you, Kurt Caesar, University of St. Andrews. Thank you all for your presentations. I have questions for two of the presenters. First to Dr. Suzuki. You give the explanation you give of the change in policy in Malaysia sort of gives a new meaning to state capture, the state capture from without. And, I think, at least I feel that's what's been happening in the United States as well. But I'm curious how that's changed with Mahathir's return, whether you see a resilience or a bounce back to the previous policy on the South China Sea now that that's no longer a factor. My other questions are to Dr. Matsaki. I mean, it seems to me that part of the reliance. I mean, you talk about these people don't contribute to the tax base, but they're absolutely required to do labor. That's why they're brought in part because the domestic labor has not developed in these sectors where these people have worked. So there is a reliance of the government on being able to import labor from South Asia or Southeast Asia into the Arabian Gulf states. And I'm wondering whether you have seen any manifestation, or you detect through your research a sense of a potential constituency, common interest, among local populations who are disenfranchised because these are all non-democracies, and these immigrant laborers. You'd already mentioned in your previous answer that they are kept separated, and so people aren't even aware of the conditions. Probably, don't want to be aware, I think, also. I'm curious about that, and the subset to that question is, do you see a strategy on the part of the labor importing countries to make sure that they have a diversification of labor from different places so they can't assemble a large common constituency of these laborers that might be destabilizing to their ability to dominate? Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. We have another question here. Please.
Thank you. My question is to IMS as well. Your description about the security in South China Sea seems to be that ASEAN and Southeast Asia is being sandwiched between two great powers, the rivalry of power, and as mostly conventional understood as well. This is a power-based analysis. I just would like to talk something a little bit different as I work in a new book manuscript on the perception discrepancy and the perception convergence towards international order, and using South China Sea as a case, one of the cases. So for me, I think it is very much connected with the perception discrepancies among three main players: ASEAN, China, and the United States. I still very vividly remember one episode in 2014 when I was working in DC for Center for Strategic International Studies, CSIS. We had a Chinese delegation, actually track one. They talked something about how they perceive issue in South China Sea. And they talk quite differently, and they have very different perceptions. For example, one concept like freedom of navigation. The both sides agree with that. But they, in terms of content, substance of this concept, they differed fundamentally. Then the Chinese side, they thought freedom of navigation good, but it's mainly meaning for the commercial freedom of navigation. But United States, they say, the United States seems to be more like to the even the warships freedom of navigation. And China thought that this is unfair. This order was unfair. Who give you legitimacy? So it's that episode, when I listen to that episode, it seems to be this a contest of the legitimacy of international order. Not only power, right? Power is superficial, it's phenomenal, is there, but fundamentally, it's intellectually, how should we reconcile this discrepancy? It will be very much connected with the future. And South ASEAN, of course, is sandwiched and we give very different choice. But sometimes it did not want the United States to involve too deeply. It does not want to make military alliance with the United States. So they have their own perceptions of international order. So the legitimacy, how to rebuild this legitimacy will be key for the future. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. If you don't have any other pressing question, we will ask Stassen to answer.
Thank you very much. First, Mahati, yes. So the state was being captured by China. You put it very beautifully. Thank you very much. I was looking for that. And then how can Mahati bring it back to normalcy or where it should have been? I think this is where, again, this model is important, and yes, Mahati won the election in May this year, And in the electoral campaign, one of the issues was this actually South China Sea, and then also the Chinese influence in Malaysia. Mahathir was saying that Najib was bought off by China, and Najib sold its Malaysian sovereignty to China. And then numbers of voters actually reacted to this issue, so I really have to do comprehensive research on it. But intuitively, it was an important issue. So now Mahathir won, and now Mahathir has to perform because he's accountable to the voters. And Mahathir has been actually doing a little bit by bit, for instance, by canceling some of the public works funded by China. And then when he does so, he said we have to rationalize the over-dependence of China, etc. So, as I said, since Mahathir is dependent on the performance he's going to perform to reciprocate the support given by the voters, I'm pretty sure he is held accountable on this issue, and then I'm pretty sure he is actually doing many things to rectify. But also, I have to say that Mahathir has been taking a very cautious approach. He does not say that we should cut the tie with China. Of course, he wouldn't say anything like that because, as I said, China is the largest trading partner in Malaysia. But he certainly does things. Second, the perception about South China Sea. It is a very, very important issue, especially how China sees South China Sea issue is very different from how Japanese scholars see South China Sea issue. And then the legitimacy of international order is what China has been provoking. Yes, I understand, but at the same time, we should note that China is a party to the United Nations Convention on Law of the Seas. The country agreed with it. In spite of it, the country's behavior is contradictory to what is written in the law. I will just stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Matsuo.
Thank you for your question. I'm afraid that I already quite followed your question, so I would like to confirm your question. That did you say that the migrants in the AGS pay taxes to the government?
No, I'm saying that their contribution to the society is their very labor.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that they're not making a societal contribution is there. I mean, that was my contrary point.
Yes, it's true. I have to explain the number of migrants living in the, for example, in Dubai, 80% of the population are migrants, and in Kuwait, more than 70% consists of migrants. So their contribution for the society is very large, very huge. So that's why I'm wondering why there are so large economic disparity, or why they are treated as very under very low states. But as I told you that even though the many Kuwaitis or many ordinary Emiratis do not know the real situation of migrants because they do not live together, so there is no chance for ordinary citizens to change the migrant situation. And also about the question of constituency, as maybe you know well about the politics of the Gulf states, that the only Kuwait and Bahrain implement the election, and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the Arab Emirates, there is no election, so there is no so-called constituency. But if the government allow the migrants to vote, as I told you, that there is the imbalance of number between citizens and migrants, so the citizens lose their right to participate in the politics. So the nationals do not allow give them to the right to vote.
Thank you very much for the answers. Do we have one last question from the audience? If not, I think that it is lunchtime coming very soon. I would like to thank all the speakers. They are representing elected teams. I appreciate this. I would also like to thank the discussant, So I would like to also to invite you for the lunch on behalf of the organizers and to meet here at 2:30. Is that right?